Hello, everyone. My name is Vianney Lubis with the Alumni Society. Welcome to our first SocietyCast program. I'm going to give it a quick minute or two here before we get started, just to give people some time to log on and get settled in. And I see many of you are already using our chat box, which is great. So while we wait, I do want to encourage that. I want to encourage you to use our live chat. Share where you're joining us from. I think that's always fun. Say hello. Let me know if you can see and hear me okay as well. Hello, Kathy, Krista, Pedro, Amanda in New Jersey. That's great. Also, while we wait, we have two polls that are located here at the bottom of the screen that we've added for today's discussion. So while we wait, if you can take a quick minute and answer those two poll questions, that would be fantastic and also very helpful for our speaker today. Hey, Andre, how are you in New York? Samuel Sarmiento, Carlos from LA. I love it, coast to coast. We're just going to give it a few more seconds here to let people log on and get settled in. So say hello on the chat box here on your right. All right. Krista in St. Louis. Okay. Victor, good to see you, Victor. Thank you so much for joining us today. All right, so let's get started. It's been a couple of minutes, so we can kick off. So hello again and welcome. For anyone who is just joining us, I'm Vianney Lubis with the Alumni Society, and I want to officially thank you so much for joining us today and taking time out of your busy days to participate in our first SocietyCast program. I hope we're all staying safe and healthy during these trying times, which is why I'm really excited to have this be sort of our first opportunity to bring our network together digitally. This is something that we've been wanting to do for some time now. And although the circumstances, in the world aren't that great right now, I think it's really important that we all continue to come together and inspire each other and continue this community building. So the goal of SocietyCast, this is our first virtual event series, is really helped to do just that. It's helped to facilitate inspiration, insights, and innovation with all of you here today and in the future for those who will tune in with our replay. So before I introduce the speaker, I just kind of want to take a couple of minutes to run you through a few housekeeping items and give you a quick rundown on how today's going to go. So we're going to have about 10-15 minutes with our speaker, which I will introduce to you shortly. And then that will be followed by an interactive Q&A session with all of you. So there are two main ways to submit your questions. So I encourage you to submit them at any time during the presentation and the talk using the Ask a Question feature, which is located here at the bottom of the screen. So you can use that feature to submit a question. And in addition, here's sort of a pro tip. If someone has a question that's similar to yours that you wanted to ask, you can actually upvote that question just to ensure that it gets answered. It pushes it to the top, basically. Please note, we are going to wait until the end of the talk to answer questions, but I encourage you to submit those during the duration. In addition, I will be monitoring the chat box here on the right-hand side. Pedro, thank you for letting me know I'm a natural. I appreciate that. But no, feel free to use the chat box throughout the day or throughout the talk here, and I'll be monitoring that as well. So ask your questions there. Now, because we're an Alumni Society familia, and I think a lot of us do know each other well, I want to invite those asking questions to actually come on screen with us and join it so that we're a little bit more interactive today. So of course, that's optional, but I just wanted to give you the heads up. So let's invite our speaker to the screen now. Hey, Cecilia, how are you?
Hi, doing well. Hi, everybody.
So I want to introduce everyone to Cecilia Corral, who is our speaker today. She is going to be speaking with us on the very timely topic of building a remote workforce. Cecilia is joining us from Austin, Texas. I wish I was in Austin right now, where she currently leads a fully remote 50-plus person company called CareMessage. In fact, last year, she was named and featured as one of Forbes 30 under 30 in healthcare. So really honored and excited to have you with us here today, Cecilia. With that, I'm going to let you take the stage. The floor is yours, and I will come back for the Q&A. Okay.
Yeah, thank you so much, and thank you everyone for joining us. And excited to share a little bit about my experiences with working remotely. I'm kind of walk you through the journey that we've gone through, and then definitely want to make sure we leave a lot of time for Q&A at the end. But wanted to start with just how I was personally introduced to remote work. One of our first software engineers at CareMessage, who's actually now our director of engineering, was the person that taught me and has continued to teach me a lot about remote work. And from the very beginning for CareMessage, our engineering team was really where we started having our engineering team be the kind of remote version of a remote team within our company. And the rest of us were actually based in San Francisco. So that's where, kind of remote work started for me, was having members of my team that worked remotely. And then for that team that was already remote, what we noticed over time, and the reason I became a big believer in remote work, was that we just saw that team generally, was a lot more productive. They seemed to be happier. For us, CareMessage is a nonprofit organization, and so there was no way we were going to be able to compete with paying market rate salaries for San Francisco and compete against, a lot of other better funded organizations. And so that was one other reason that hiring people, specifically engineers outside of the Bay Area, just made a lot of sense for us. And then overall, one company that I definitely recommend if you're interested in hearing and learning more about remote work, there's a company called Basecamp, and they've literally written the book on remote work. They put out a lot of materials via blog posts, and they have a podcast, and they have a number of books that they've written about remote work. But what I think I really valued the most was just all the additional, benefits that came from having a fully distributed team. There's a number of benefits that come from that, and things that Basecamp has really sort of led that are good for your organization as a whole, including, having the ability to have compensation bands. So everybody gets paid the same no matter where they're working from. Basecamp also just has generally a great business model. They become fully profitable, even though they have a really small team. So they've just kind of been my sort of model company for a lot of things that we've tried to structure at CareMessage that kind of started with remote work, but then seeing a lot of those benefits from having a fully distributed team. So that's kind of where we were at for a few years. Then at the end of 2018 was when we kind of started to talk about and decided to take the company from being a partially remote team to being a fully remote team. And the reason that started was because, again, it started with our engineering team being remote. And over time, a lot of the other departments at the company started to hire people that were remote. And by the time we knew it, about half of our team was already remote. And so it just made sense to make that move at that time. And a lot of the benefits we had seen with the engineering team, we started to see with other departments in terms of people in other departments seeming just a little more happy, being able to, balance, work-life balance was really important, and something that felt like people that were working remotely were able to do much, much more easily. From a diversity and inclusion perspective, just having the ability to hire the best people no matter where they are just opens up your pipeline for hiring. Again, we were originally based in the Bay Area. Bay Area and is already not very diverse. And so when you're trying to hire and build a diverse and inclusive team, you're limiting your pipeline if you're only hiring in a specific region. And so having a fully distributed team gave us that benefit as well, to be able to hire people anywhere across the United States and really across the world. We have had team members in India and Canada, the US, Brazil, and Chile. And then from a financial perspective, I mentioned earlier, we weren't really able to compete with salaries specifically for our engineers in the Bay Area, but it extended to a number of other departments as well. And so having set compensation bands that were leveled with the Bay Area, but if you decide to live in Austin, for example, where I live now, and not have to pay, the amount of rent. So finances for our team members, finances for us as a company really improved as well by going remote, not having to pay for an office. We're a nonprofit. So it just felt like the money we had was better spent in other things that were more productive for our team than having to have this HQ, this office in San Francisco. And personally, I can also speak from a personal perspective. I was kind of done with the Bay Area. I wanted to leave the bubble. I wanted to make sure that I was, closer to the users that we work with, the people that we help, and that just, leaving the Bay Area kind of gave me the opportunity to do that as well. So again, this started sort of at the end of 2018, early 2019. We actually closed our San Francisco office. We actually had a number of team members that were based in San Francisco leave the Bay Area, and they got a chance to move to other places that they had been wanting to live in, like Seattle, and some people moved to Orange County. And so again, that just gave people the freedom to not feel that attachment to being in the Bay Area and find more affordable places to live and overall increase their quality of life. We did have some team members that decided that remote work was not for them. They really just loved being in an office, loved being around people. And that was okay. Remote work is definitely not for everybody. So that's definitely something to think about if you're considering, making your team or considering taking the jump into remote work. It's not going to be for everybody, and that's okay. Some people really thrive from having people, again, next to them in an office setting. But since then, since that closed down of our office, the last year and a half or so that we've been remote, we've really just continued to invest in a number of areas. I wanted to call out just some things for you to be aware of and think about if you're thinking about, going down the path of working fully remote, or maybe you're experiencing it right now, because we know, with COVID-19, a lot of people have had to work remotely for the first time. So I'm going to talk about, 5 or 6 things to take into consideration. The first one is just focusing on asynchronous communication. When you're in an office, usually you might go up to somebody, you tap them on the shoulder, you ask them a question. You shouldn't be trying to replicate some of that online. It really, the essence of remote work is kind of founded on asynchronous communication. And so figure some of that out, where it might make more sense for you to spend more time maybe on documentation, maybe not as much time on meetings. And so that's important from a workflow perspective, that you have processes in place and just guidelines on how people should be communicating. And on that front, also just, trust your people. And I know on the poll, I saw a few suggestions there on performance management. When you're working remotely, you don't get to see whether people sit on their chair, right? And that's something that when you're in an office setting, sometimes people might perceive like, okay, if I sit in this chair the longest, my manager's going to think I'm working more, working harder, doing more. You don't have that via remote work. And I encourage you not to use any tool that tries to get you to track people's time. That's not what remote work is about. You really just focus on the results and trust people, trust that they will manage their own time. That's just really important to have that trust on your team members. And with that in mind, collaboration is going to be a little bit more difficult. It has to be really intentional. When you were in an office, it might have been easy for people to cross-pollinate and meet people from other departments and come up with ideas on things to work on together. It's not going to come likely as naturally when you're working remotely. And so think about ways that you might create intentional opportunities. At CareMessage this year, we created a structure for what we call team impact projects and company impact projects. And it's basically the most pressing problems that we have either as an organization or within specific teams. And then it's a structured way for us to bring people together from different departments to solve a single problem. And so it just has started to force some of that collaboration. COVID-19 has just kind of been another opportunity for people to work across teams. And I'm happy to talk more about that work in the Q&A. But collaboration, again, is going to be really, really important. And with that connection as well, it's going to be potentially easier for your team members to, suffer in silence or feel isolated if they're working remotely and you don't have things in place. So just a few of the things that we've tried that have worked really well. We have Slack channels with different themes. We have a Slack channel for for kids. We have a Slack channel for foodies, for travel, for pets, you name it. Just people can suggest any type of theme where they might want to connect with people around that theme, and they get to join that channel and chat. And, it's a really great opportunity for people to replicate what might have been, kind of a water cooler talk that you might have had in the office. ERGs were also something else that we implemented in the last year that have been really beneficial to help people connect with each other. We launched 3 ERGs, one for parents, one for people of color, and one for women. Just again, giving our team that intentional space to connect with one another and get to learn from each other and meet people that they might not have otherwise. And something that I've just started to do more recently as the leader of the organization, I've started to host one-on-ones with every single member of our team. It took a lot of time for me to get through all 40 plus employees at the company, but it's probably been the best use of my time in the last few years, just getting a chance to chat with everybody one-on-one, helping them feel like they have that connection, they have that avenue for communication. So something that I would highly recommend you all do, especially during this time, because again, people might, the remote working environment right now is not a typical remote working environment. And I'll talk a bit about, kind of remote working during COVID-19 in a few minutes. But with that in mind, one last thing that I want to leave you all with is the importance of wellness, not just due to COVID-19, but in general, when you're working remotely, it's easy to just keep working and not find an end to that working time. And so leverage, tools like on Google Calendar, you can set working hours. We have people write in their Slack profile, they can put their availability, how to best get in touch with them. We also changed our policy from having sick days to what we call wellness days. And so that allows people, if, they just need a break, to take that break, not feel like, it's not frowned upon if they need to take a break for whatever reason, whether they physically feel sick and need to go to the doctor, or again, you just need a break from time to time. We highly encourage that. We encourage people to block off their lunch hour on their calendar, or put a stretch break on their calendar. Those things are really important when you're working remotely, because you're sitting in front of a computer all day, and just for your own wellness, mental, physical, etc. It's good to take breaks and step away from work every now and then. And then I know the majority of people on this call are, you're probably leaders at your organization. It's important that you model that behavior, because, if you just put a policy in place and you're not being an example, people might not actually want to follow along. And so that's something that I try to do as much as I can, letting people know when I take a wellness day, or I led a presentation last year on preventing burnout, and just being really honest with my team about even the times that I have felt like I'm nearing burnout. So it's important to have those conversations and again, be that representative as a leader at your organization. And then the last thing I wanted to touch upon is the fact that, if you're working remotely right now, it's not a typical remote working environment. There's a lot of other things going on with COVID-19. And so one of my biggest fears with how quickly people were moving to remote work because of COVID-19 was that people might have a negative experience and not realize that that experience is maybe more because of COVID-19 and not so much because of remote work. So just be conscious of, the fact that your team members might have a lot of life stressors outside of work that might make it even more difficult for them to work than usual. We've had, a lot of people on our team that are working and they're also having to be their child's teacher, or, they have now a toddler running around, and, sometimes they're like worried because somebody's going to hear them yelling in the background. Like, those are things to take into consideration, and just, try to be a little bit lenient and conscious of that, and how you're supporting your teams with the fact that, again, right now, everyone's working remotely, but it's not a typical remote working environment than it usually is. And, in the scenario where people have additional support systems that are maybe not available to them right now. So that's all I wanted to talk about as a starting point, but I'm happy to help answer any additional questions, and we can jump into the Q&A.
Perfect. Yes, Cecilia, we have 4 questions that we have been posed here, if you want to take that away. And Carmen, as a reminder for everyone, we would love to, can you all hear me?
Yes.
You can? Okay, good. So a reminder that we would love to invite you to join our screen so that we make this a little bit more interactive. So if you are okay with coming on screen, let me know on your chat box as well. Use the chat box. If you have a question that you've posed, let us know. If you are, just say yes. Write the word yes on the chat box, and that'll tell us that you're good to come on screen.
Great. So I'll get started with, it looks like the first question on here on how do we manage work hours, since working remotely can often mean that you're always on. So we have, our team is distributed. We have an engineer in India. We have a lot of our engineers in Brazil, Chile, and in the US, like from the East Coast all the way to the West Coast. People set their own working hours. And so we don't necessarily have, we generally try to have a few hours of overlap across time zones. But outside of that, you know, everyone kind of sets their own working hours. And if you use Google Calendar, that has a great feature that allows somebody to set their working hours. And so I have my working hours on there. If somebody on my team is trying to schedule something with me outside of those working hours, it actually sends them a notification letting them know that what they're trying to schedule with me is outside of working hours. You know, not necessarily a company policy, but usually if somebody's trying to schedule somebody with a meeting with somebody that's outside of their working hours, kind of the norm is to go and ask them first, and try to only do that in kind of extreme scenarios so that we're not eating too much into people's personal time. But yeah, it's been the best way for us to just sort of implement and force everybody to think about, like, what are your working hours? Let's put that on the schedule. Let's try to stick to that as much as possible, because otherwise, yes, in extreme scenarios, we value when people are able to work a little bit more, but usually, you know, we want everyone to stick to 8 hours in their time zone, whatever that ends up looking like.
Great, thank you. I'm going to invite Pedro to the screen to ask his question, which is next, I see. So he should be coming on momentarily. Pedro, can you see that? There we go. Hi, Pedro.
Can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Okay, so I'm getting on live. Hi, Cecilia. Thank you so much. This is fantastic. I'm probably having the biggest challenge working remotely out of everyone on my team. It's been a struggle for me. I love coming into the office. I love seeing people working. But my question's around tips scaling either new information, communication. Right now that we're remote, we have Slack or we have email, of course, or a new initiative. How have you effectively scaled out some new initiatives that you've launched at the company?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we've done a few things, and we've also kind of played around with just a number of different strategies for doing that. I think what I've seen be most effective is the repetition of information, especially when you're either communicating a decision or a change, or like you said, launching a new initiative. And so what we'll try to do is communicate. And so I bring something to an all-hands meeting. We follow up with an email. We put it in compliments. So it's just like the repetition helps make sure that people receive the information, because it's sometimes it will blind spot for us in a lot of ways in the past. You say something at an all hands, but maybe somebody didn't attend the all hands and didn't hear that information. And so just making sure we're sending it through different channels to where people are able to capture the information as helpful. People also just learn differently and process information differently. So we've had some team members that have also told us, like, oh, I really like when that's sent in a written form in an email, because I can kind of like sit with it, think about it. I can follow up with somebody and ask questions if I have them. So just the repetition is important. Written documentation is really, really important in a remote working environment. And one of our engineering managers also started a newsletter where she kind of summarizes kind of key things that are happening in the department, and she sends it out to the entire company. And that's something else that we've received a lot of really great feedback with people that are like, oh, that's great. Like, I get to see the update on the roadmap. I get to see an update on how the agile teams are doing. I get to hear about these other decisions that the team is working through. So written communication and communicating through different channels is probably the best way that we have found to be able to do that.
Squeeze in another question in while I'm on screen and I don't know how to log off.
Go for it.
Go for it.
What are some of the most effective platforms you're using? You mentioned Confluence, which I just wrote down, but obviously Slack sounds like you use. What are some of the other ones that you have found effective across the company to use?
Yeah, Google Docs as well. I think Google Docs just continue to be really helpful when you're collaborating on something, because Confluence is not really great for collaboration. I think Confluence is good for documenting once you've made a decision, or if you're working through something that doesn't require kind of a group working on something at the same time. Slack, there's also a bot that you can add on to Slack called Donut. I think I forgot to mention this, but it allows the bot will randomly pair two people for coffee. And that allows just like, it's like a very easy way for you to get people on your team to connect with one another. The only requirement that we have for that is that people don't talk about work, but it just randomly pairs two people across the company, no matter what department, for a chat. There's a lot of other kind of interesting Slack integrations. There's some to bring in, like all of our new customers, it gets posted on Slack through our Salesforce integration as well. Salesforce, obviously, for everything tied to our customers. We use Intercom for communicating with our customers and for internal communication around support tickets and just coordinating internally what we're communicating out to our customers. And yeah, I think those are probably the most utilized tools, at least for me. And Gong. I think I might have seen a question around things for our business development team. There's a tool called Gong that allows you to record calls, and it sort of gives you insights on themes in the call, and then you can add comments to it and tag other people. So our account executives might record a sales call, and then there might be a question from a customer in there or product feedback, and then they get to tag a product manager or someone else on the team to go in and listen to that. That's also something else that that's been really useful.
I'm actually inviting Carlos onto our screen. He did ask about the business development, but maybe we can elaborate on that. So he'll be joining us momentarily.
Maybe while we wait, I'll just talk a little bit about, I know there's a question in here around what CareMessage has done for COVID-19. So we work in healthcare, we work with underserved populations, we work with free clinics and community health centers that serve underserved patients. And so we've been really busy over the last 3 weeks with a number of clinics that have been doing messaging for their patients. And we have been supporting kind of a library of COVID-19 related messaging to underserved populations from information. It started with a lot of information around hand washing and moved on to sending them information on symptoms to look out for. Right now, we're doing a lot of messaging around how their appointments are getting switched to telehealth and just kind of education around that. And then the more interesting piece is some of our clinics are using text messaging to ask patients if they need help with housing or food during this time. And we have some great clinics that are actually purchasing food and delivering that to their patients. So it's been a really great to see that type of communication happening between clinics and patients. And we've messaged about a little over 2 million people in the last couple of weeks, which is also a lot more than we do in a typical month. So fortunately, no downtime though. Things have been going well.
Wow, that's great. Well, we appreciate all that you've done to support these efforts. It looks like Carlos was unable to join us, and we're just getting to time. We're going to try him one more time, and if that does not work, we're figuring it out together. This is our first one, so we'll invite him up here again. Well, it looks like I'm unable to. We have one more, Amanda Sporer. If you want to answer that one, and then I think we can we'll call the time here.
Yeah, so I really do think the kind of themed Slack channels have probably been one of the most useful ways that I think people have had the ability to have just those ad hoc conversations with each other around a specific topic. That the donut kind of random pairing of people for them to meet one another. And then one thing that we just started to try, we use Zoom. I should have mentioned that tool earlier.
Mm-hmm.
We use Zoom for a lot of our virtual meetings, whether it's with customers or internally. And Zoom has a really cool feature where you can set up breakout rooms. So we just started testing that during all hands and having a breakout room and just randomly, setting people together to chat and catch up on life, and then bringing them back to the all hands to have those meetings as a group. So we've just tried a number of those things, especially with different time zones. I think we have people from a variety of backgrounds as well. So we just encourage people to share. It's been interesting to hear just even how our employees in India and Brazil, like how their countries have been handling COVID-19, and having them share that with the group has been helpful. During this time, we set up a Slack channel just for employee support where people are able to talk about things that they're struggling with, like, somebody's roommate getting diagnosed or somebody's family member, and just the team sort of coming together to offer them support. So those are just some of the ways that we've tried to just be intentional of creating those spaces for people to have those conversations.
That's great. Thank you. Okay, well, I think that is all the time that we have for today. Thank you all so much for your questions and for joining us. We really appreciate it. And Cecilia, thank you so much for your insights and for your time. It was incredibly valuable. You've been a pioneer in remote workforce. You've been thinking about that as the future while we've all sort of been thrown at this new remote reality. So we appreciate those insights. For anyone who we did not get to answer any questions or your questions were left here, we will send you an email afterwards with a response to your questions as well. So if you want to see this again, share it with your networks. We encourage that. The replay will be available after the broadcast. We're going to send it over to you. And this is new for all of us. We're learning as we go. So we would love your feedback. Let us know how we did today, how this worked out for you, what you thought, and also what you want to hear next as we continue to build the program. It's going to happen every 2 weeks. So the next Societycast is going to be on April 16th at 1 p.m. Eastern. We're actually going to be interviewing Andres Idaraga on the topic of perseverance, which Pedro is going to lead that discussion. So hope you will join us for that. So if you want to go ahead and register, you just go to the Crowdcast page after this session and you can put it on your calendars. In the meantime, again, thank you, Cecilia, so much for your time. Thank you all so much for joining us. We'll see you soon and stay healthy out there.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.